Hello, and welcome back to another chapter of Heroes and Hermits by Alganaver on AO3, Chapter 8. Impulse's first impression of the kids in front of him was generally positive. And although he got a chance to say hi to everyone in their class and see himself how kids who are not that different from ones he saw in other worlds, he needed to hurry. There was only so much time in the day, and he did not want to leave Scar alone for too long. The kids Scar told him to talk to were the one with a bird head, the boy with a split color in his hair, and the kid from earlier with green hair. Impulse felt more comfortable talking to Izuku first, so he pulled him aside and explained that he wanted to look for Green. Surprisingly, the kid was super excited about it, and quickly agreed to help. It took them about an hour to assemble behind the school gate. Izuku and other kids needed time to dress up, and Impulse needed to disguise himself. They were forbidden from leaving the school, but Scar assured him that nobody will notice Impulse's absence. At first, Impulse had an idea of Scar putting an illusion on him, but it was abandoned due to concerns about Scar's well-being. Additionally, there was no guarantee that his spell would stay in place at long distance. For their trip, Impulse was dressed in a yellow-black recolor of Scar's suit. Even the hat was nice and black with yellow accent. How Scar made it was a question for another time. For now, all it had to do was make Impulse look different. Good look was a bonus. Impulse did not anticipate to actually look cool in it. Usually this kind of attire made him feel anxious. Looking at himself in a car reflection now, he was impressed at how well the suit was fitting to his figure, despite no measures ever being taken. The hat was the coolest part, old gentleman-y and stuff. He hesitated for some time whether to keep his shoes or change them. It was a minor detail that mattered a lot actually, because now he could enjoy the clicking of his new heels. It made him feel very stylish. The kids, on the other hand, came dressed in a typical superhero style. While Izuku and Shoto had more sport-type outfits, Fumikage had an awesome dark cape. His whole dark aesthetic made Impulse think of one particular bird-themed hero with whole white aesthetic. It would have been funny to compare the two. But it's not like Ultraman can appear here because it's definitely totally not the man who we are searching for right now, thought Impulse. The thought made him chuckle. Because they were all walking close to each other, it caught the attention of one of the boys. Fumikage asked him in a defensive tone, "Is something wrong?" Oh, Impulse never wanted to make him feel uncomfortable, so he hurried to explain his laugh. "Just thought that Green might like you. He likes all the bird stuff, you know? And he was, back home, he was friends with a hero who was a bird and had an all-white costume. Sorry if I made you uncomfortable, just my silly brain has no control over my body sometimes." "Must be painful," said Shoto, who was walking in front of them, leading them back to the place where they saw Green last time. "It is." Impulse nodded with a straight face. "It usually leads to me crashing into my own machines and blowing them up. Or one time my friends and I decided that instead of taking apart some things that were in the way of my build, we should blow them up. Spoiler, we all got blown up." "Our classmate has an explosion quirk. You would be surprised at how often we spend our days just like that," stated Shoto, making Impulse chuckle again. These kids had some crazy fun stories to tell, and Impulse was very curious to learn more about them and about Japan. Before he could ask them to tell him more about their lives, Izuku went ahead and asked, "What about your quirk, Impulse?" Scar mentioned it earlier, I think, but you see, I want to know as much as I can about everyone's powers. Can you tell me more? Please? If it's not too much trouble for you, that is. Sure, replied Impulse quickly, only to realize that he already forgot what his quirk was supposed to be. He was too focused on his calm's modifications, and his brain was overfilled with worries about his friends. He simply forgot. Destiny was smiling upon him, it seemed, because exactly when his silence was about to get too long, there was a sound of Shoto's phone ringing. And now they were running. It was some kind of emergency where Shoto's quirk was needed, and Impulse didn't want to abandon his mission too early. Besides, he could help if things got out of hand, and he didn't want to seem incompetent against these kids, all who immediately switched to a battle-ready mode, bolting after Shoto, who knew where to go. Peer pressure. What else could he say? That is why he took off running, catching up to them. Izuku gave him a surprised look, but did not comment. Running in shoes with big heels was a challenge. Impulse could compare it to running with fully extended claws. Unpleasant. As he ran near a glass display, Impulse caught a glimpse of his figure in the reflection. Well. Maybe this running was unpleasant and even painful in some ways, but at least he looked good doing it. Getting closer and closer, the streets in their way became emptier and emptier, and Impulse could smell something in the air. There were people running away, car traffic frozen in the streets. Whatever that emergency was, it was kind of big. Was it a supervillain? Terrorists? Aliens? Could Impulse be considered an alien? He was from a different world, maybe even the universe. It should count, except he didn't really feel like one. Aliens had spaceships and lasers, while Impulse only had Scar's funky hat. It could be mistaken for a spaceship, so big as it was. With this thought left for later consideration, they arrived at the scene. Now Impulse could see what he could only smell earlier. Smoke. Albeit a strange one. Rising high up above the burning park area, it was pink in color. Impulse needed a second to take in the scene in front of him. It was a typical park like Corrales would build it, with trees and pretty fences and seats and tables. The road they used to get here was turning around the park, so it was connected with the road by one side, while others were surrounded by buildings. One of them looked like a mall from the movies, and it was currently on fire. Just like the park below, it was consumed by magenta crimson flames. People must have already evacuated, because Impulse could only see heroes, police officers, and firefighters around, all of them working on putting out the flames. And Shoto joined them by running beside Impulse and further into a crowd of people. Other two kids stayed back with Impulse, probably because their powers had nothing to do with fire. Impulse could now see how Shoto summoned ice from his hands to help contain the fire, which seemed to be very stubborn and not go away. The area was now tinted dark pink, somewhat reminding Impulse of the Nether. People around him did not care about that. Everyone was focused on putting out the flames. So Impulse slipped past them, deeper and closer to the fire. Two kids following him. "We should find Endeavor," stated Izuku. "His quirk won't help with the fire, but he's here to investigate who might be responsible." As he said that, he pointed to the edge of the park where Impulse could see a tall, fire-covered man exiting. The flames on his body were different, however, typical red against these weird pinkish ones around him. Impulse concluded that they must be part of his quirk, and that's why he seemed fireproof to them. Not to the other flame that was around him. His costume was damaged, revealing singed skin below. It was easy to spot him, commented Fumikage, as they ran towards the man. He spotted them before they could announce themselves, and Impulse preferred to stay back when the kids got close enough to talk. That guy did not look friendly. There was ferocity in his eyes and tension in his muscled body. Understandable, because it was a dangerous place to be in right now, but Impulse couldn't make himself come closer. Impulse knew enough about people to not provoke a stressed person, an injured stressed person. Rather let the kids deal with that guy. They were alarmed to see him burned. Izuku's face twisted in horror when he stared at Endeavor's own pained face. Yeah, must be weird for a fire guy to get burned. He looked so confident despite that, carrying himself with an air of authority and power. And Impulse did not feel jealous of how some of these heroes were built. He himself was by no means a small man, with his share of powerful muscles. People here just had exaggerated proportions, he concluded. That was why so many of them were that big. Back at UA, he saw some teenagers who looked similar in proportions. It was just how people in this world were. Impulse had nothing to do with it. His body was normal by his own standards. Except Endeavor, he saw no other extremely buff people around. And that, for some reason, made him think of the Hermits, who were all different shapes and sizes too. But with them, he never felt that way. He never felt so out of place. Impulse was snapped out of his thoughts by a shout, followed by an ear-splitting blast. A literal moment after which he was tackled by Izuku, and they both fell on the ground. When Impulse opened his eyes, he could see and hear chunks of concrete falling around them. A second later, a shield of darkness covered his view, and Impulse heard a low growl as pieces of concrete were flying in different directions, being deflected by the dark entity in front of him. Rolling over and separating from Izuku, Impulse stood up and looked over at Fumikage, from whom the dark entity was extended. "You alright?" asked Izuku quickly. When he received a nod of confirmation, he rushed past the dark shield. Fumikage turned to Impulse and said, "You should stay back. I need to help others." With that, he jumped away as well, the dark entity covering him like a second cape, as he rushed after Izuku to a bunch of fallen debris. Left alone, Impulse may have had zero intentions of staying back and waiting. This may not be his fight to fight, but these guys were his allies, and they were so young too. Whatever hero training they might be doing, they were still kids. Impulse won't stay down and let kids get hurt. Before running back, he took off his hat and left it near a lamppost. He'll pick it up later, so it won't get damaged. After doing so, Impulse sneaked behind big pieces of concrete that were filling the street now. By some armature and paint flakes, he could tell that used to be a wall. Stepping into a clearing, Impulse could barely see through the smoke-filled air, an outline of broken buildings. Some parts of it were on fire now, but it was hard to tell due to all that smoke. Impulse was lucky it did not restrict his breathing. It did not restrict his breathing, huh? With one balanced jump, Impulse was on top of one of the debris pieces from where he could see further away. There were still people around, and some shouting could be heard now that the debris had stopped falling. Impulse turned away from looking at vaguely human-shaped shadows in the smoke, now turning his attentions to another side of the road, at the park, which was no longer on fire, just like the mall next to it. Impact wave of the explosion must have put it all out. Impulse doubted that it was like that. Still probable, but not convincing. He saw that fire being showered with sand and water, ice melting on it. It should have gone out ages ago. It should have, but it didn't. Probably because it was not a regular fire, thought Impulse, and sharply exhaled. Right, he did not focus on the details when he first arrived here. Too concentrated on getting back to searching for green to notice the obvious. The unique, unmistakable fire of the deep nether. The unending flame that burned the souls into ash, that covered the soul-sand valleys of the nether. It had a pleasant smell to it, probably why Impulse was not alarmed when he first came here. He might have not noticed it consciously, but his body reacted positively to the smell of home, the smell of a friend. There could only be one source of that flame. His hands were shaking as he opened his comm and started typing in the private chat. Should be within distance if that recent explosion had anything to do with that. Tango, are you here? Shouting around him grew louder, but Impulse did not dare to tear his eyes away from his communicator. He saw it. His message was successfully delivered. It was all he needed to know. Reassurance that his friend was here. He could reach him. There was the problem of actually finding Tango, in this mess of heroes and broken buildings remains. Impulse did not stand this. Will not stand this. He must find Tango right now. Finally turning his attention away from the scene, Impulse closed his eyes for a deep moment and took a deep breath. It smelled of the deep nether, of concrete dust and dirt, of soot around the burned trees in the park, of gunpowder and sweet flowers. Was there a flower shop near, or were the flowers in the park still blooming? Impulse thought it was winter, a time too cold for them to flourish. Tango's smell he knew by heart, its metallic undertones, molten rock and ash, his stupid perfume he insisted on using, but nothing of it was bright around for Impulse's senses. Tango must be around that building that exploded then. True to the standards of the boomers, this explosion was loud and destructive, though how Tango blew it up remained the mystery. It was not like they could make TNT here without creepers. There was no gunpowder. Plus, without a crafting system that made everything easier, Impulse had no idea how to turn sand and gunpowder into TNT. Tango must have figured it out. He was always so crafty and brilliant with all of his new ways of farming stuff and building machines. While Impulse was busy with Scar striking alliances with locals, he must have been busy exploring the ways the new world was operating by and inventing new stuff. Impulse was by the building's remains in a minute. His feet hurt a little from running so much in heels. They weren't that high, just uncomfortable. Around here, Tango's smell was stronger. Now that he was closer, Impulse had to switch from focusing on his sense of smell so much. Smell of gunpowder was overwhelming him, and heightened senses were taxing on him due to limited magic. Scar was right on that part. This world had no magic whatsoever. It made their lives even more of a pain. His comm pinged. Impulse's eyes immediately snapped to it, but before he could open the message, he heard someone running to him. Turning his head, he saw Izuku, who was being closely followed by Endeavor. His comm sent another ping. Ignoring Izuku's voice, Impulse looked down at the screen. Hey there, handsome. Just stay where you are, okay? These simple words almost made Impulse cry of joy. He would have cried for real if not for the sounds of arrows piercing the air that zipped right near his ears. One after the other, 3 arrows landed behind him, causing both Izuku and Endeavor to jump away from them. Impulse did not need to hear them move. His eyes were focused on tracing the arrow's trajectory, where they came from. There, on top of the ruined building, he saw a figure clothed in a dark green cape, their face obscured by a hood. But this figure did not stay long. When Endeavor launched himself towards them, they dodged with graceful skill, jumped higher and higher up the ruins of the building, until Endeavor's flame finally caught up to them, setting their cape ablaze. Impulse only turned his eyes away for a second when he felt Izuku brushed against his arm. The boy walked past him, but did not move to help Endeavor. Besides him, Impulse could see more people crowding around, firefighters mainly. Some readied their quirks or equipment to put out the flames Endeavor created around his attempts to catch the shooter, who was still on fire. Jumping around and dodging Endeavor with ease, their slim figure and phenomenal agility being a fair match against the hero. It was the laugh that finally made Impulse recognize his friend. Tango cackled as his green hood burned away, revealing his wild blonde hair. Under the burning cape, he was wearing his usual outfit of black and red, and his big eye crew glasses that magically remained on his face shined in the daylight as he moved. To no surprise, Impulse was momentarily enchanted by this fire show in ruins. Endeavor's flames eating away at the remaining green on Tango as he continued laughing. One move, he bent down the slip under Endeavor's hand. In a smooth turn, Tango was behind him. That gave him less than a second to jump on Endeavor's back. Of course, the flames there did not hurt Tango, and Endeavor seemed shocked when he felt the weight on his back. Impulse could guess that hardly anyone would risk doing something so dangerous and daring. But the hero did not waste any time. He did not reach behind to try and catch Tango. Instead, he suddenly fell forward, intending on rolling on him. Tango, the experienced Ravager tamer, used this moment to push off Endeavor and perform a longer jump. As he flew in the air, Impulse could see him smiling. When he landed on the other side of the ruins, he turned to look at the crowd. "Hi, everyone! Welcome! It's a fine day, isn't it? A bit hot, not gonna lie, but so am I." This was the moment when Tango's hands were suddenly enveloped by some black wines. They came from Izuku, who then jumped from where he stood right next to Tango. The force behind his almost knocked back the Impulse. That was some impressive strength for a young boy. Impulse knew he was strong. He was training to be a hero after all. But it was still surprised him. And Tango seemed bewildered for a second too, staying in place when the kid landed next to him. "Wow, what a determined audience," said Tango, "just like I love." He was smirking in confidence, as if he was asserting himself over the enemy by smiling. Izuku stumbled away, barely holding his balance on the debris when Tango's hands erupted in magenta flames. It forced the black tendrils to retreat, and Tango jumped down. Impulse's first thought was to rush to him, but instead he forced himself to stay away. Tango asked him to stand, and it would be foolish to antagonize others by revealing their connection. Turned out he didn't need to do anything. Tango himself faced the crowd and met Impulse's eyes. No words were spoken between them, but Impulse could sense it in the way Tango's eyes were burning behind his glasses, how his smile was tense, how stiff his eyebrows were. Big trouble might be coming. If Tango was on edge, then there was definitely a second meaning behind this whole show. But what could that be? Tango wasn't usually malicious destructive, to a degree of setting an entire neighborhood on fire. There was no straightforward way of asking, not with the giant crowd and heroes being around. And it seems like Tango got the same idea when the flames appeared again, filling the area with smoke while firefighters started to try and put out the fire again. Impulse stood firmly in place, waiting. He trusted Tango above all else. It was a trust built by years and years of partnership, common hardships, highs and lows. Impulse was smiling, standing in the smoke as his torso was suddenly grabbed. Now now he could see Tango's smile up close. A different smile, actually. It was no longer a grin of self-confidence or pride. A smile of happiness. At long last, they were reunited. In his lanky body, Tango was hiding a lot of power. Who was responsible for it? Tango, who was masterfully piloting the body, or Doc, who built it for him a long time ago, was left unanswered. Impulse enjoyed it anyway when Tango tackled him on the ground. He had joked about Tango's form before, mainly during parties or when they were building something together. For him, it was a bit comedic when Tango would wrestle a Radbringer or an iron golem to show off. Impulse has never been on the receiving end of his strength before, of course, plenty of times. However, it did not mean it still wasn't surprising, or painful. He coughed when his body was violently slammed against the pavement. Tango sat on top of him. His smile quickly disappearing, he lowered himself towards Impulse. "Play along," he whispered. Next, he slammed his hand on the ground next to Impulse's face. The sound of metal claws digging through the ground made Impulse wince. "Impulse!" loudly exclaimed Tango. "At long last, you dare show your ugly mug after everything that happened?" And then he winked. To play his part, Impulse pushed himself up and caught Tango by the collar, throwing him off. "Yes, I dare! You were the one who did that!" They both stood up, glaring at each other. "Tango, why would you betray me?" "It was for the better future." "You can't faze me with your damn lies." "No hesitation this time. You're going down." "Then catch me, moron." With that, Tango jumped again, just in time to escape Endeavor, who was about to fly to where he was standing. Fire and smoke were everywhere, to the point that it became hard to see even for Impulse. He did manage to chase Tango through it, leading them both away from there. "Oh, I will. Better run for cover or you'll end up blazing in your own fire." The chase wasn't long. A couple 100 meters ahead, Tango rapidly turned around and jumped Impulse again. This time, though, Impulse was ready for him. Tango's claws glazed and slipped over the crystals that momentarily grew on Impulse's arm. Under the pressure, they shattered, leathering the ground with purple shards. They were sharp, not so fragile. Stepping on them would be painful, fortunately, or not. They both ignored them as they clashed in another fight. Tango's metal feet in his shoes felt no pain, and Impulse's scaly paws had long ago torn his shoes. Impulse only noticed it when he accidentally almost stepped on Tango's foot. "Sorry," he whispered, and continued with his pretend attacks. He was play fighting, not really fighting, after all. No need to harm his friend without reason. Besides, Impulse had no idea if Tango had access to medical care in this world. They kind of have no chance to chat about it. "Keep it up, big guy, you're doing great." Tango's whisper sounded from behind, being the only clue to Impulse being then pulled by his tail from behind, ruining his balance. Wait, his tail was out? No good, no good. This was not supposed to happen! Impulse had to throw Tango off of himself to turn around and check. Yeah, his tail had torn through his clothes, and now was swinging side to side in excitement. It was not as long as a dragon's tail, but just as sharp and heavy. Tango should be careful not to run into this thing. Impulse barely controlled it. As they continued the play flight, Impulse could hear Heroes finally catching up to them. He shot a questioning look to Tango and slightly nodded his head at the direction of the sound. Tango's eyes darted there for a moment, and then he smiled. "Fine then! I will back down until the darkness falls over the world. I shall crawl out in the middle and tear out your soul. You hear me? You better be ready." That was how they parted ways. Tango finished their fight by punching Impulse to the stomach, and he pretended like it hurt while his friend jumped away. It was suddenly cooler around, the comforting warmth and familiar smell gone. Impulse was alone again. surrounded by confused heroes, with Izuku talking to him about something, asking questions with a scared face. The only thought on Impulse's mind was how hollow inside he now felt. He wanted to go back to Scar. On the back of his mind there was another thought, that his glamour was starting to slip. His tail and claws were out, and the street around him was filled with broken shards and mangled melted ore chunks. The fight with Tanko, no matter how fake it was, still tired him out. It had been a while since he had to fight properly. This world had a lot of new experiences in it, more like long forgotten ones. His life in cozy safety of his home was gone. Surrounded by strangers, his friends gathered around, Impulse had no strength left to uphold his human form. He was sleepy. He only wanted to curl up next to his friends and rest. But first he had to deal with all that noise that kept annoying him. Snarling, he swung his claws and roared, finally letting his tension out. The sound of his roar silenced all other sounds as it rolled around, echoing through the streets. His chest tensed again, and Impulse let out another roar, letting his claws sink deep into the ground, crushing it, and reaping anything to stop the growing craving inside. What was happening? Where did this anger come from? Impulse saw Shoto and Fumikage in the distance. No, not the distance. They were right in front of him. Damn, he completely butchered everything, didn't he? Now they would probably attack him just like they attacked Tango. He didn't want to fight the kids. They were so young and small. They had so much to do besides getting tangled in this mess. Impulse, sir, you're safe. It was Shoto's voice, so calm and nice. Are you in pain? That man attacked you, but now he's gone. You can relax. Some commotion was happening behind him, and then Impulse heard a familiar voice. Yeah, Impulse, relax. Can't have you looking so gorgeous and so upset at the same time. Scar walked right up to them. In his hands he was carrying the hat Impulse abandoned earlier. Impulse? Impulse, look at me. Looking at Scar's eyes as he asked, Impulse realized that he was sitting on the ground, still gripping asphalt in his knuckles. His sleeves were burned and torn. The rest of his suit was a mess too. But Scar was wearing the suit too, the red one. Then where did this one come from? Did Scar make it? Hey, don't look away. Scar was right in front of him now, gripping his shoulders and smiling. Look into my eyes, and nothing but my eyes, as one great man says. So Impulse looked. He looked deep into Scar's eyes. Slowly, the sleepiness became unbearable, and Impulse was too weak to fight it. Scar was there. It would be all right. And so Impulse gave up and closed his eyes. Tango slipped past a team of firefighters who were still lingering around the ruins of the building. Whatever distraction Impulse had created, it worked wonders. Everyone rushed there, and Tango managed to come back undetected. Running around, he found a dark corner under a piece of wall to hide under. Oh, how he wished his calm was still with him. That would have made this entire process so much easier. He could have shot Impulse a message or two instead. Instead, he had the hope that Impulse understood his last words. Etho needed his calm more, so he gave it away. And Impulse was a smart guy who knew how to guess clues. For now, he had to find Etho and Doc, reunite with them, come back for Impulse at night. Making sure no one was around, Tango sneaked out and made his run towards the back of a supermarket next door. Running by the dark wall, Tango thought of B-Dub's poor moss cape. It never got a chance to be returned to its owner. What a shame. It was so nice and stealthy. Running in between buildings and trees, Tango finally saw the clue. Green chunk of moss-like plants. In this world, people would be none the wiser and think of it as a simple plant. He picked it up and rolled it in his fingers. Warm and soft. A creeper bud. If you saw one growing around in your garden, you would tear it down and burn. Unless you wanted to get an explosive surprise when they grow up. Perhaps this one would never grow, but it was a perfect way of showing the way to Tango. When he was younger, he would constantly try to grow one of the buds he would collect from Doc's back. It never was easy to do when he wasn't looking. It was easy to do when he wasn't looking. Tango never succeeded, no matter how closely he would follow encyclopedias or internet on how creepers grew. Until Doc caught him in the act of watering his little garden of buds. It was silly back then, trying to grow a creeper that would probably explode the moment it was mature enough, when he had a whole-ass father figure as one. But Tango was curious, eager to experiment. He followed a trail of buds to an underground parking lot. Jumping through a window, he saw another bud laying near a seedy door on the back wall. Walking inside, he saw Etho and Doc sitting in a tight closet among spare tires and boxes. Between all three of them, Doc was the one who looked the worst. His fur was sticking in all directions, unlike his hair that was damp and still dripping water. Tango sat down next to him, careful not to sit on his paws. "Everything good?" he asked the others. Doc hummed and said, "Not counting me getting kidnapped, I've had better days." "Yeah, well, what, did they do anything to you?" asked Etho. "I think some kind of trafficking agency, like hybrid hunters back then. I couldn't quite make out what they were talking about, but they were planning on selling me to some quack doctor guy. And as a scientist and a doctor myself, I feel my self-esteem lowering just from the idea of them manhandling me." "Too bad we didn't know more," said Tango. "Then we could have gotten proper revenge, 'cause no one can do this crazy mess of kidnapping. No one!" "Well, we would know more if Etho could hold back a little, and now with that big explosion we can't even scrape them off the floor." "Oh, sorry then for not letting them drug you even more. I wouldn't have had to interfere if Tango didn't mix up the address I told him." Tango huffed. Etho expected him to perfectly know the city where he couldn't read the street names. "And what? What's the difference? There was 2 buildings of fire instead of 1. What a big deal. Unlike you, I can't read the signs, genius. And we did rescue Doc. See, he's fine and not even on fire, so shut up." "My lab coat is torn again, and I just got a new one last week," said Doc, and straightened his coat that was covered in ash. Tango sneezed and turned away. But this little pause reminded him about another thing he needed to say. "By the way, I ran into Impy while I was distracting the locals. He's in some kind of alliance with them, I think. I saw him talking to them, and they didn't attack him." "Should have said so earlier," said Etho. "Come on, lay it out." "I saw him come in with some superheroes. He was in a cool black suit, super awesome. Seeing him in a jacket with a tie almost made me fall off a building. Man, it was some crazy stuff over there. There was this guy who could use fire as well. He challenged me to PvP, and I think I won. Because then there was a kid with black tentacles. Can't say much about him, but he was super strong. And then I got distracted by Impulse in his very nice suit and didn't pay attention to anything else, sorry." "Don't worry, it's not your job to collect intel. That's what we have Etho for. Better focus on Impulse. Do you know where we can find him?" "No, not really. I tried to tell him to meet us there at midnight, but I don't know if he caught it." Etho stood up from where he was sitting on some tires to sit down in front of Tango. He then said, "At least we know he's here. I can find him from there. I seem to have somewhat of a record number of hermits, I find. One more would be easy to track down, especially if he's not hiding, and is actively allying with the locals." "How can we forget the omnipresent Ethos Lab?" Doc chuckled, and then Etho reached his hand and tousled his hair. Etho's face expressions were hard to judge, but Dango could see he was smiling under his mask. Doc let out a displeased grumble, but Tango was sure he could feel Doc purring despite his outward frustration. Moving closer and putting his head against Doc's forearm, Tango could for sure feel and hear his low, content purring. "What now?" asked Tango, not moving from where he was practically lying on Doc. "Now," said Etho, "I have a meeting with some people. I need more energy to bring us home, and I have a plan on how I can do that." Doc continued after him. "And I will go back to tinkering with blueprints of our portal. If Ethos' plan fails, which I'm not saying it will, but it might, then we could use it as a last resort." He looked down at Tango. "Are you going to go find Impulse, or—" Tango considered it for a moment. Impulse would probably still be around that area. It would be easy to find him. The issue was that he was not alone. Tango could jump and dodge all he wanted, but actually fighting humans? Maybe not. It would be wiser to wait for Impy at midnight. And if he won't show up, then go to Etho to start searching. Or am I going with you back to base to eat? I sure hope we have something for lunch." "I'll order us some pizza. We need it anyway," said Etho, and standing up again. He seemed to be anxious to start moving again. They would have to track all the way back to their base, on the other side of the city. While Etho could move as fast as the universe would let him, Tango was agile and fast. Doc was a bit too suspicious looking. Unlike those kidnappers who moved him in the car, they would have to devise a plan on how to move with him quickly and without attracting attention. Doc always moved silently and very quickly, with a speed surprising for someone of his size, but people would still see him. Etho was standing at the door, looking outside into the parking lot. Then his eyes turned to Tango and Doc, then looked back outside, then back at them. "Tango, do you know how to drive a car?" And that is the end of Chapter 8.